Hey guys, this week I wanted to address one thing that really happens for the past, I'd say, 5, 6, 7 years, right prior to the pandemic, and that would be the uniformity of the market. It became very clear that in the past maybe 10 years, a switch was made between the fact that most people wanted to buy, I'd say, 10, 15, 20 models of watches. And if I'm including, for example, like a Submariner, I'd say all the ceramic Submariners post 2010, 2009, let's say, when they appeared, they were in demand, but then even though they were there was still a pretty big demand for the 5-digit subs, for example. And I want to address this just because a lot of people right now are always looking for the same thing. So the demand is still very high for Daytonas, subs, GMTs. If we're looking at Cartier, anything in the Santos line, maybe vintage in this case, but a lot of them are brand new. And everyone is looking for AP, the same speedies, the same thing. So we're basically concentrating the whole market into maybe 20 watches, 25 watches that everyone is looking for. All the dealers are always running after the same models, and that's why I try to do something different. I'm not looking to get away from that. We cannot get away from that market where, I mean, it's a business, so I still like what I'm doing, but I also have to think of the future and to sustain the business itself. But in general, I find that monotony, the same thing, we're doing the same thing all the time, we're answering the same questions. It's always the same watches that are being offered to buy or to sell. So it's always becoming the same type of circle, whereas it's not just a business. I'm not doing this only for the fact of making money, and that's why I'm getting more and more away from that line of business. Why? Because everyone's doing it. So it's very simple, it's very common. Everyone knows the prices. If you're on Moda, you're on WhatsApp groups, you see like thousands and thousands of guys trading the same watches over and over again. Made them in Europe, in Hong Kong, in California, in New York, wherever they are, doesn't really matter. It's all the same thing at the end of the day. Prices may vary a bit depending on condition, on the fact that they have box papers or not, and so on and so forth, and it's pretty much equal. Like it's an open market where everyone has, knows and has the same information basically. So I'd say the fact that people are really looking for the same pieces all the time is actually cleansing, the information of the market. I cannot only deal with the same 10, 20, 30 watches on and on and on, the same Datejusts, the same Submariners, the same GMTs, and the same Speedies, for example. Like, we're in Canada, so the market is a bit, like, I'd say it's more, I'm tending to go more towards more affordable pieces, but I don't like where we're going because we're basically destroying what this is all about. And I find that in the States and in other places, like, let's say you go to Singapore, you go to Hong Kong, you go in Japan, where I've been last year, and the market is very different. You can tell that people really know their watches. They're more in depth with the knowledge. It doesn't restrict the market as much. Especially for Canada, I find that it's very limited. Everyone's afraid of vintage, and you shouldn't be afraid of vintage whatsoever. Again, I've seen a lot of dealers that may sell everything and anything in terms of condition, touched up cases, poorly polished cases, poorly touched up looms and everything. Those maybe 20% of people is scrapping the whole market for the other maybe 70-80% that are doing a good job. I find that also I'm not letting pass any errors. I'm not trying to let pass any mistakes in my inventory, just because I'm not happy with what the outcome of what it is. For example, lately I got a Submariner Red 1680, and when I came to list it, the pictures were taken, everything was fine. And when we get them fresh to market, so they haven't been doctored or anything. But in this case, just happened that the dial was much older than the watch, maybe about 5-6 years older. Therefore, I cannot list that. So what I did is that I took it apart. So the dial, the case, the movement, the bracelet, everything went online on eBay to sell separately. So that's what happens most of the time. When items like that come in, I have no other choice than to be true to myself and say, look, maybe I'm going to take a loss, maybe I'm going to be making a bit of money, that's fine. But I don't want to lose my name over something as peculiar as just a watch that doesn't have the right serial number with the dial. So vintage is a bit scary, but if you don't have even the curiosity or even the little sparkle of being interested at all by what it is, then no one will. So that's why it's all about knowing a bit, being curious, reading books. There's a lot of books on the subject. Books might be a bit expensive. You might find the older versions maybe not as detailed as the newer ones that go maybe more in depth of every single variant or version of the dials, of the cases, or the inserts. But that's what creates the fun of this whole industry, is that every single watch is different, every single watch ages differently. And finding a watch that's in really good condition is very nice to have. Might be for collecting or for reselling. I'm proud to sell good watches when they come by, and that's what it should be. And it shouldn't be something that people tell me I'm scared of touching vintage. If you're scared of touching vintage, then might as well just go buy everything new from a authorized dealer. But your watch, as soon as you take it out of the AD, it becomes a second-hand watch, and eventually it's going to come into my hands or anyone else's hand that is dealing with watches, might be now or in a generation or two, and then they're still going to become vintage by then. So we have to take care of the market, we have to educate people, and that's why I'm doing those videos right now. And it's not all about money, it's not all about the trends, it's all about knowing what you're collecting, knowing what you're interested in. And the fact that right now people come to me with really rare watches, I'd say maybe not very valuable. I know what they are because I've been in the industry for over 15 years, well over 15 years. I started collecting over 25 years ago when I was a kid, and seeing all those watches and seeing the market going where it goes right now is a bit sad, because it's not limited to those few watches that everyone know about or everyone talks about. So most YouTubers, TikTokers, anyone that wants to yell about watches right now online is always talking about the PRX, for example, or Audemars Piguet, or always the same models, always the same thing that always comes up on the market. And what's very sad as well is that they have nothing to show up for when it comes to watches. So they're talking about watches that most of the time they haven't even seen on hand or properly analyzed personally, and that kind of triggers me, because you cannot analyze a watch just by pictures, just because everyone talks about them, and it kind of pisses me off, literally. Not in a bad way, but in the fact that, hey, like, we can do a lot better, we can inform people better. Don't be limited to what everyone else is doing. I could be doing the same thing. There's no interest in doing that. You know, all the people are already covering those angles, so we can do a lot better by sharing what our knowledge is. You know, the fact that, for example, Valjoux 72, the two pushers are not at the same length or same distance from the crown. The one from the top is always a bit closer to the crown than the on the bottom. That's one little thing. It's no news, but anyone that's interested by vintage, that, you know, there's maybe a million movements that were produced by Valjoux, the Valjoux 72, and those movements are very iconic, very sturdy, nothing to be scared of them. Parts are readily available in most cases, except for Rolexes. For Rolex, it's a bit different when we're talking about 62, 63, 62, 39, or different variants. Each one of them had different updates, different little modifications over, you know, over a course of maybe 30 years. But I'd say in general, most of those watches are really interesting, because when you get into the details, that's where everything counts. That's where everything makes a difference. Their history, the fact that everything matches on a watch, and all those informations are already available online. So even if you're looking at just a specific watch, right now I got a really cool little watch. It's going to be posted soon on the website. It's called the Ducal, and it's a Ducal Submariner. It's basically so it's a really funny watch. It's a compressor's case with a proper hash, crowns. I think it might be even almost a hand painted dial. Almost. It was sold by Vintage 1983 from Spain to a local collector who's originally from South America. So those little watches, you know, when you see them, especially with the online, you go look with Google image, you try the name, you try different things, and when there's the only one that ever popped on the market is the one you have in your hands, it's something really interesting. Again, if I propose this to maybe 99% of the people walking in my store, even though I tell them about the history, even though I tell them how rare the piece is, they're not going to be interested. They're not even going to be curious about what it is. And that's what kind of makes me not like my business as much as I used to, because I'm the opposite. You show me something I've never seen before, I'm gonna ask questions, or I'm gonna look it up, I'm gonna do my due diligence, and I'm gonna know more or less what it is. I'm not gonna go all the way in depth with every single model. I'm not that encyclopedic, but I'm gonna try to know at least the basic stuff about every single watch that goes through my hands. If there's something that interests me even more, I'm gonna go more in depth. I'm gonna take maybe even half an hour to look up a watch, even though it's only a sale, it's only becoming like transactional, but it's more than that. It's adding to my own knowledge, it's adding to my portfolio of watches that I've had in my hands, even though it's something that's not gonna be worth more than $1,500, $2,000, you know. In the case of the Ducal, I don't think it's going to be worth more than that, even in this market, even if it's rare, even if I claim whatever story about it, it doesn't really matter. The value is pretty limited on those pieces, and it's fine, but the rarity of something like this, and the fact that it's a brevet case, it's whatever you want to call it, it's much more interesting on yourself as a human being to actually know something, to learn something, than just to say, hey, I just have the same watch as my neighbor, or everyone told me to buy XYZ Seiko or Tissot or whatever brand that's being out there, and whatever model that's being advertised out there. And you're basically just limiting yourself. The fact that you're being curious doesn't mean you have to buy everything that's rare. It doesn't mean you have to actually go in every single store and bug us, for information. You can do it on your own. You can, it's like school a bit. You do all the research, you do everything in school, but yet maybe 90% of what you learned is not something that you're going to actively use down the road. Maybe you're going to use parts of it, but the fact that you did the research, the fact that you studied, the fact that you took the time to actually progress in life, it's not only about, hey, I have the money, let me buy this, and that's it, that's all. It becomes, it's not purely transactional, and it kind of kills the whole idea and the whole interest of watches. And there are quite a few guys out there right now that are talking about really rare watches, but I do consider that even the smallest watch out there that's not so valuable, or that's not so rare or interesting from your first perspective, or at first glance it might look like nothing, but it's history. The fact that maybe you got the watch from your uncle, or from your grandparent, or from your parents, that attachment, even the smallest watch out there, the most insignificant watch, could be very interesting because of its history and the attachment you have for it. To finalize with all of this, I'd say take the time, learn, teach yourself what you're all about. Every single person is different. Every single person likes different things. It's not because someone has, and I've met people like that in the past, they have just the money for a Seiko, or they have 2-3 watches that are really not valuable. But I met young kids, much younger than me, that have 10 times my knowledge in watches. They know about everything that comes out, they know about stuff that was made, and I do have a lot of curiosity myself to actually talk to those people and see what their background is and how come they know so much about watches, even though they cannot afford them. And that's why that's what kind of also is very limiting. A lot of people tell me, oh, I'm not interested by that watch because it's not something that I would ever buy. It doesn't mean that your childhood dream should disappear, but like when you were a kid and having a Lamborghini on the wall, it doesn't mean that you have to actually not dream about something like this. Don't lose your child in you, and don't lose hope into maybe getting something down the road that's gonna be a dream of yours. Never give up. It's something that you have to pursue and you have to fight for. So this whole industry is limiting itself, is limiting you, and don't let it be. Don't let it crush you and make you think that this whole watch industry is only what you see online. You can do a lot of research and you can do a lot on your own. I hope that helped you guys, and I wish you a very good week, and we'll talk more about watches in the upcoming weeks. If you have any questions, again, just message at the bottom, subscribe, and leave a like if you do enjoy the videos and my suggestions about collecting watches and about everyday life. Thank you guys.